Okay, well, we're going to go ahead and do chapter 12 here as well. We'll see how this turns out. It's quite windy out here, but I wanted to kind of give you a little different thing to look at here, so we're going to go ahead. All right, chapter 12. Jude had returned to Damascus from Jerusalem. His attack on the priests and the money exchangers as Yeshua the Mashiach ben David had not generated the immediate following he had hoped. As disappointing as that realization was, he also detested the fact that no one seemed particularly concerned about the continuing use of the temple treasury to fund Pilate's aqueduct. Having confronted the Herodians and the establishment Pharisees and priests in the court of the Gentiles, he had rushed away. Changing his garments several times in the city while he quickly moved enabled him, as usual, to avoid anyone following him. Anyone except Joseph, who had been watching him from the time he entered the city until he left through the gate of the Essenes. Joseph made good time and arrived at Damascus well ahead of his twin brother. He went to Jacob's tent to wait for Jude to arrive. He and Jacob did not wait long. Jude came to Jacob's tent immediately after washing himself and once again changing his clothes. "Greetings, my brother. May the blessings of Hashem be upon you," Jacob said to Jude as he stopped at the door of the tent. "Come in and rest yourself." Jude stooped slightly to clear his head past the door and was surprised to see Joseph sitting next to Jacob. "Joseph," Jude said in surprise. He let out a long breath. "What brings you to Damascus in Jacob's tent?" "I followed you after your entry into Jerusalem and your attack on the exchangers and merchants at the temple," said Joseph. "Joseph wanted to ensure that no one followed you that could track you back here," Jacob tried to explain. "I don't need Joseph's help to do that," Jude said with a slight hint of displeasure. "No, your skills are excellent and your men well trained," Joseph said. "The only real problem was that you did not see me." "Why should I have been looking for you?" Jude asked, his impatience showing. "The people are too weak to do anything more," said Joseph, deliberately not answering his question. "The people want to expel the Kittim, but they have lost hope. The occupation has gone on for too long, and the methods of the Kittim too severe for them to overcome." Jude was beginning to think that Joseph was right, but he could not let Joseph hear the words. "Jacob, I realize you have a respect for Joseph's claim as the Mashiach ben Joseph, and that you do not see it as a threat to the throne of David," Jude explained, trying to calm his initial anger. "But this is confusing to the people, or it will be when this is explained to them." "There will be no explanation to them," Joseph said. "This is not an issue they need to choose, though a small number have embraced it. Even when they call me son of David, just as they do you, it is not something for their eyes or ears. You can and should remain as you wish to be the son of David. All that is required is that you do the demonstration." "I suppose you will do the demonstration of the Ben Joseph?" Jude asked sarcastically. Joseph did not answer him. "Do you know what it is?" Jacob asked Jude. Jude tried to suppress his frustration. "I do not wish to see my brother, any Jew, any Israelite die at the hands of the Kittim," Jude said. "But Joseph's position divides the people. They need one standard at a time." "And you are the Mashiach ben David?" asked Joseph. Jude looked at him as if he were mad. "You were born with the crimson thread and went about your life in opposition to its requirements. I took your place out of necessity. I was the rightful heir when you abrogated your birthright. Even the community council recognized that." He stopped for a moment, and Joseph and Jacob allowed him to gather his thoughts. Then he continued, "Why ask me about what you no longer seek? You now claim the position of the Ben Joseph. And the two callings are not the same. There should be no enmity between us," said Joseph. "They cannot exist at the same time," Jude insisted. "Correct," said Jacob. Jude stared at both of them. He was not sure what Jacob meant, and he really did not want to ask. "Look, Joseph's brother-in-law Eliezer was pronounced dead, and you, Jacob, let it stand." Jude was trying to grip the situation. "You are a righteous one. We all recognize this." Joseph nodded his head in agreement. "Eliezer's removal was merely a revenge for my refutation against the council and Laban regarding Joanna," Joseph commented, but without much emotion. "I sincerely trust you had nothing to do with that." Eleazar was in no danger, for Joseph' ordinances are as authentic as that of the Community Council of 12, or mine, explained Jacob. Joseph remedied the loss of Eleazar's position in the way by raising him more fully into his own order. Joseph reprimanded the council, and they recanted. Joseph reprimanded the council. What? How could that be? I brought the council to Joseph the day he raised him, Jacob continued. They no longer see him as an opponent. Jude was stunned again. He had been so busy trying to give life to the resistance that he had not known of the recent events. As for me, Joseph carefully interjected, the temple in Jerusalem is defiled, and I do not see that anything done there has any validity. I look to Shiloh, not Jerusalem. The first house of Hashem was a tabernacle in the wilderness, as it was in Shiloh. The ark was kept there. The ark was Hashem's presence, and it was Hashem we worshipped. We did not worship an idol of stone, temple or otherwise. We were and are to perform the Torah with or without a temple. Do you not remember why the temple was first built? It was to be the house for Hashem's presence, the Ark of the Covenant. Yet the Ark has not been seen for hundreds of years. Why do you insist that the temple holds the key to our relationship with Hashem? What is the body without the spirit? Do we not bury the body when the spirit is gone? Jude became more incensed the longer he listened. He was about to rise in anger, but Jacob waved him to remain seated. Jacob's motions convinced him to remain calm. Joseph continued. You should desire to prepare the temple for Hashem's blessings, that Hashem may return the ark to its tabernacle. Then there may be a purpose to honor it. But then again, the ark's proper place is in Shiloh, where Moses' sons originally kept it. Judah removed the ark. Our own King David of Judah took it upon himself to remove the ark from its home of antiquity and placed it in Jerusalem for safekeeping. Safekeeping? Cannot Hashem fight his own battles? Anyway, the house that Solomon built was to house the ark. Our enemies destroyed the temple and took the ark because of our folly. After the captivity, our people returned and built another temple, but there was no ark. Then this pretender Herod enlarges the temple. For what? To house the ark? No, for the ark is gone. No, he built it for the people, for his priests, for his own glory. He had no honor with Hashem. He was not even the rightful heir of the throne of Israel. Most certainly he had no right to administer Hashem's house. How can you deny this? Joseph was calm but firm and relentless. Jude remained silent. However, you were right to tell the Herodians and their collaborators that even though they have destroyed the temple, in 3 days of purification you could have it again acceptable to Hashem and his ark. Of course they will not allow it, neither will they stop the sacrifices for the Katim, or prevent Pilate from obtaining the temple money for his projects like the aqueduct. But if you were successful in cleansing the temple, then Jacob could do the Yom Kippur atonements there in the Holy of Holies as the Torah commands him, or continue his prayers in the desert as he sees fit. That is his duty and never should stop. Again, perhaps Hashem will return the ark. Admittedly, at the very least, we would have a place of purity to conduct our ordinances and prayers, as you have argued. But our hearts must be sufficiently pure first. The problem is that your recent activities there did nothing to purify that place. What you have done has endangered our efforts to surprise the enemy. Caiaphas and Pilate surely took notice and are making every effort to infiltrate and identify us. You may have made their efforts much easier for them. Jude felt deflated, but he was also a man of reason. He had to admit that his work had not gained him or the resistance any major advantages. He let out a long breath and hung his head. What do you have in mind? He asked Joseph. Jacob smiled. We cannot hope to defeat the Katim in open battle or by assassinating those of little power and authority. Hashem holds the leaders responsible. They are the ones that should pay, not the people, and not even the men of mere wealth or lower positions. Why not the men of wealth? Because such men with mere wealth are nothing but the pawns for the truly powerful. We must not waste our efforts. We must attack the head. If we must spill blood, it must be that which is guilty. And with them desecrating the temple and stealing the temple treasury for their own gain, we have a righteous reason for our actions and a purpose to solidify the people to our cause. That will not end the retaliations which so demoralize our people, Joseph, said Jude. In fact, it may increase them. Whom are you talking about anyway? We are speaking of Herod, Caiaphas and Pilate, Yoses explained. Jude, shaking his head in disbelief, immediately sat down where he had been standing. What are you talking about? Jude asked. They are the most protected men in Judea. Yes, Yoses agreed. However, at Passover they are all in Jerusalem, greatly easing the problem of making a strike against them. Even though their guards are increased, we can penetrate their defenses with 3 concentrated efforts, since they are our only objectives. Besides, seizing them will bring a halt to the theft of the Corban, and allow the cleansing of the temple you so desire to accomplish. If it is done quickly, Hashem may bless our efforts as he did for Joshua when he circled Jericho with the ark to destroy the walls and defeat their enemy within. Hashem's people and the chosen lineage will again administer in the temple, its treasures again in the hands of Hashem. Is this not what you have always desired? Caiaphas in his home, Pilate in his fortress, and Herod in the palace, Jacob commented before Jude could answer. Only Caiaphas will have one change, the temple. Otherwise, their places are known and fixed. Jude shook his head. Yoses, do you desire death at the hands of the Katim? Yoses did not answer. The 2 brothers looked at each other. There was a long silence. Jacob sat quietly. My desire is to do the will of Hashem, Yoses finally said. The removal of the Katim from our lands is a part of that. This plan has a chance for success, as they will not consider that we would attempt such a bold action. It is a step to a better position of negotiation, and it may make the price of occupation too high for them. A soldier is nothing to Caesar, as he will allow thousands to die. His aristocracy is his weakness. They are his real support. Jude had the most intense feeling that Yoses had not really answered his question. Furthermore, he had written Yoses off before. To entertain this idea seemed weak and ridiculous, but these new plans had his attention. His own, unfortunately, had been found lacking. How do you see it unfolding? Asked Jude. We have fooled the Katim into thinking we are one and the same person, Yoses began. Both of us should bring our forces to Jerusalem under the cover of the people coming for Passover. We will divide the forces on the east and place unarmed men inside the city. The Katim will believe that if anything is going to occur, it will happen before Passover begins. They think the people will not disturb their celebration. They will not think it will be after the celebration if no one stirs up the people with inflaming oratory. And we won't. They will also believe the people too tired to do anything after the Passover, especially days later. With no stirrings among the people before or during Passover, Pilate and Caiaphas will think there is no cause for concern. They let their guard down, and then we make the 3-pronged assault on the 2nd day of the week to take all 3 of them and no others. Our priests will then enter the temple under Jacob's direction and begin the purification so that in 3 days we may offer sacrifice. We can then prepare for Yom Kippur. Why did you mention our duality? I see it of no effect here, asked Jude. I will depart toward Galilee after our own Passover on the 1st day of the week, and ensure that my departure is noticed, explained Yoses. You will stay in Jerusalem and conduct the operation. Yoses is not going to take any credit. Yoses will not lead the people, but only be a planner and diversion. Is this what he is willing to do? Jude was full of questions. So, we will both be in Jerusalem for the celebration of the community Passover, celebrate the regular Passover, and then you will make a very obvious departure that will draw attention to you and away from us. Jude repeated the plan to be sure he understood it. Then our forces need to be controlled from the Mount of Olives and Mount Scopus. We can place a flag system there for our leaders to watch for signals. The central command post should be in Gethsemane. Jude was reasoning out loud. Once you have departed, we pass weapons over the wall to those inside, and with 3 spearheads enter the city from different directions, but each close to their final objective. Jude stopped and thought a moment. You know, it just may work. It just might work. Then we are agreed, asked Yoses. Jude held his words until he stood up and brushed the dust off his robes. Agreed, Jude said. I have a man who is very reliable, and he has ties to the Herodians. I believe I can use him to plant the information that I will be going to Galilee after the Passover to do more preaching. You are sure he is trustworthy? Asked Yoses. Someone, as you know, identified my operations in Tarichaea. This man has never known our entire system, but he has progressed in his studies in piety, explained Jude. All I need tell him is that I am going to Galilee. What could he make of that, even if he did suspect anything? Joseph nodded in agreement. The men shook hands and embraced. Joseph headed back to Bethany, and Jude went to his family in Damascus. Jacob resumed his meditations. The next day, Jude, as Yeshua the rabbi, met with several new proselytes and several zealot resistance leaders disguised as shepherds in a small home in Jericho. The zealots were only known to each other, the regular attendees to the meeting not even usually aware of their dual roles. This was the best way to communicate to the resistance throughout the countryside. The mystical practice of keeping something hidden by placing it in another form before everyone's eyes continued its effectiveness. Jude had sent word for Reu to come to the meeting as well. Brethren, this is a day of rejoicing, Jude as Yeshua began. The Passover quickly approaches and we need to complete our preparations. The kingdom of heaven is at hand. Jude was giving his zealots the code for preparation of military action. Hashem desires us to purify our minds and our hearts, cleave to righteousness and shun evil. We must remove evil from Israel and from ourselves and make straight the path of the Holy One of Israel. Yeshua called one of the men. What is the kingdom of heaven like? Reu was all ears. The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed, explained Yeshua. A man took it and planted it in his field. Indeed, it is the least of all seeds, but when it is grown, it is the greatest of all herbs. It becomes a tree, and even the birds of the air come and lodge in its branches. The parable had two levels of meaning. To the uninitiated, the story explained how the love of Hashem begins small and then grows big in a man's heart. To the initiated, like the kingdom of heaven is at hand, the message was that the tree is ready to grow, expel the Katim, and begin Israel's time of deliverance. Yeshua continued with another parable to dull the ears of those who he did not want to understand the message, and further explaining what his strategy would entail for his leaders. It is also like leaven, which a woman took and hid 3 measures of meal, leavening the whole. 3 hidden forces were going to be needed. The leaders had their orders and would meet Jude later to hear the details. Yeshua taught from the Torah to complete the meeting and to deliver something of worth to every person present. As the meeting ended, he explained he would be gone to Galilee immediately after the Passover. Reu was surprised. As the group split up, he noticed several men enter a small room in the building. Reu secreted himself outside the door of the side room where the men, all of apparent standing, were talking in hushed tones. Jude intends to enter the city after the Passover and take Pilate, Caiaphas, and Herod hostage, or kill them in the attempt, said one voice. Jude? Did he say the name Jude? Reu thought to himself. Who could that be? How soon do we need to report on the number of our available men? Asked another. Planning is well underway, so get these to me as soon as possible, said the first voice. The men then exited the room, and Yeshua stopped one of them. Laban, we will gather the sheep at noon tomorrow, said Yeshua. Also, would you please have Reu see me before he leaves? Yes, Rabbi, I will make the arrangements, answered Laban, and walked on out of the building while Yeshua proceeded back to the place in the building where the first meeting had finished moments before. Reu left his position from behind the door and moved quickly over to the main door while Yeshua was examining a document. Reu then acted as if he had just re-entered. Rabbi, may I disturb you? He asked Yeshua. Laban found you already, said Yeshua. No, Rabbi, I just came back to ask you a few questions, if that is all right. Reu was careful not to do anything to raise suspicion, but he needed to get at least one necessary piece of information if he could get it and survive. Of course, answered Yeshua. Come on over and let us talk. Reu walked closer. Your words seem to be from Hashem himself, he praised. Pray only that Hashem guides me in all things, Yeshua answered. He then drew in a deep breath and exhaled slowly. The first day of the week after Passover, I plan to go again to Galilee. I will not see you for some time. Reu was sure he had understood the code delivered to the others. While still not fully initiated, his close association had revealed many of the hints of things to him. Now this information to him, that Yeshua would not be around after the Passover, seemed to be a subterfuge. Was Yeshua using him? The only question was why. Also, dare he ask him if he was indeed the man who beat the exchangers at the temple? It was now or never. I will miss you, but will look forward to your return. What will you do there? He asked. I will go there to preach Torah to those who do not see it important enough to come to Jerusalem for Passover. A wise thing to do. I have one burning question, though. It is difficult to ask, but please understand my concern. It seems that if this was you, it could be some trouble. Jude anticipated the question, as many had identified him as the man at the temple cleansing. Joseph had been right, thus the necessity for his apparent departure. "Were you the man who scourged the priests and merchants at the temple?" asked Rayu. Joseph was right indeed. Apparently Rayu may have seen him at the time, and it was best not to deny it. "Yes, Rayu, that was me," responded Yeshua. "After all, this time you finally know. Keep it to yourself. My purpose is merely to ensure that Torah and the temple rites are done correctly. You see this, don't you?" "I do," answered Rayu, "but I'm a little confused. I thought I heard one of the brethren call you by the name of Jude. What does this mean?" Rayu was taking a leap that could be dangerous, but he was willing, as he knew the money Pilate might pay him for the information could be very high. Jude now studied him for a moment. How could anyone have been so careless, and how did he miss the mistake? Yet Rayu had always been faithful, giving much to the brethren and giving them such reliable information for so long. Jude decided to confide in him. "How you have heard it means it was meant for your ears. Man has not revealed this to you, but Hashem," explained Jude. "Yes, my name from birth has been Jude, and Yeshua is but my calling. As with my strict adherence to the Torah, you see how this name is so important to emphasize all that is done." "Again I do, Rabbi. I feel so very blessed to have this knowledge of my friend and teacher," said Rayu, so sincerely that any suspicion Jude may have been entertaining vanished with the words Rayu spoke. "Then, please ensure that your master knows I will not be there to cause any trouble. I will leave afterwards and depart north to Galilee. Perhaps then your master will tell others and they will have no concerns." Rayu nodded in agreement. "Now, as far as our topic today, do you feel more edified?" asked Jude. "Much more," responded Rayu. "I return to my home with gladness in my heart. I only lament that you will be gone after Passover. I will await your return." "May Hashem bless you and your family," said Jude. "And may Hashem grant you peace," said Rayu, as he left for Jerusalem, his intention actually to report to Amaleus and Caiaphas. "So, it appears they have some grand plan to seize myself, Herod, and you, Caiaphas." Pilate looked serious. Suddenly he roared with laughter, obviously finding the whole idea ludicrous. "Who would have dreamed up this ridiculous plan other than a desperate bunch of thugs? You cannot be seriously worried about this?" Pilate asked, barely able to restrain his amusement. The Roman and Caiaphas were meeting Amaleus in the Antonia fortress. The Sicarii never seemed to come close to it, an appropriate place to discuss their plans. "The leader seems to be this Yeshua or Jude fellow," Caiaphas said. "He is the man we have occasionally seen and heard so much about, who preaches Torah in the city and the countryside. I should have known it was a cover. So this is the man who rode into Jerusalem on the ass as if he were the Mashiach. Then it was he who also whipped and beat the priests and the merchants and money exchangers in the temple to try and stir up the people to support him. He defies your use of the Korban for the aqueduct so desperately needed here. I have smelled this vermin and his plans all along, and as far as taking it seriously, yes, Your Excellency, desperate men are like caged animals. You also know that." Pilate could only grin and take a sip of wine. The warning from Caiaphas did not even make him move in his seat. He was totally unconcerned. "There are still some unanswered details," Amaleus interjected. "May I speak freely?" He deferred to Pilate. "Absolutely," Pilate assured him. "While they plan to conduct this operation around Passover, they will not violate the day the Essenes observe it with their special calendar, nor the Orthodox day set in the regular calendar as observed by everyone else," explained Amaleus. "These 2 days are merely a day apart this year, one following the other. Therefore, they will need to wait until the conclusion of the Sabbath the day after the Orthodox Passover. This means we should not expect any activity until evening after the Sabbath, and it is likely it will not occur until the next morning." "You have really thought this through," Pilate said as he leaned forward in his chair, quite impressed with the Herodian. "But you fail to consider the amount of soldiers and guards we have at this time. The siege of Jerusalem under Sabinus many years ago resulted from weaknesses we have since corrected. Any attempt to take either or all three of us will result in the immediate deaths of the perpetrators. It would be suicide." Pilate sat back in his chair and smugly took another sip of wine. Suicide is a small price to pay for those who believe they go straight to heaven for their sacrifice, Caiaphas wryly commented. As I said, these are fanatics. They believe their God will save them. They are not like the common people who have been beaten into submission, or the noble and wealthy classes who have their lives of leisure. These men live only for their deaths, and they want to take us with them. Your Excellency, do not underestimate them. Caiaphas circled the table in the center of the room and took a chair, sitting down and then wiping his brow. Pilate looked at Caiaphas and tried to laugh at him again, but it now seemed a little more difficult. We could just take him and crucify him the next time he shows himself, said Pilate, or we could toy with him a bit. Let them fall into a trap and take many more of their followers with him. That would be much more effective, sending a strong message to the rest of the people. It seems none do anything without instructions from the leaders. I think we should let them come to us. Rayu will be meeting with them again, Amaleus said. They have greatly increased their trust in him. I am certain we will find out what we need to know to counter anything they do. He will take us to where the leader is the night before Passover. Rayu will point him out, and we will arrest him with hardly a fight, then parade him to the people as the cause of their trouble, said Caiaphas. Pilate nodded his head. This is why we have used this insider. Pilate lifted his cup and waved it at Caiaphas. It is obvious we have the upper hand and we control the time and place. As soon as Herod arrives prior to the celebration, we will meet again and ensure we use the information we have to plan several courses of action. I tell you, they will not succeed. Pilate took another drink from his cup and waited for a response, but it was obvious Caiaphas was not convinced. What would encourage him? Maybe they should bait the resistance to make them come out in the open as they had before. Why don't you go ahead and execute your immerser? Pilate asked Caiaphas. Have Herod find something against him in your law and execute him. Beheading, isn't it? Strangulation, beheading, or stoning for blasphemers, Caiaphas said with some interest. How long had he wanted to rid himself of this arch rival? The idea sounded delicious. I am sure Herod will come up with an adequate reason as long as you agree to let him go through with it. It seems your people have forgotten about you, old friend. Herod was trying to intimidate Yokanan, who now stood before him in chains at his throne room inside the fortress of Machaeros. Our plan has worked quite well. Out of sight, out of mind, Herod looked over at his wife Herodias, laughed, and waited for Yokanan to answer him. Yokanan refused to look at him or say any word. You know, Herod continued, we have not changed in any single way because of your preaching. The old religion is gone. The old prophets were not all right. Hashem approves of our changes that are really nothing but the new way. Your accusations against us are groundless and extreme. Hashem has not punished us. He punishes you for your vile lies and distortions. Look at you, a pitiful excuse for a man. Still, Yokanan said nothing, but he did look up and smile at Herod. It was as if he said, "Oh, you think so?" The act put fear in Herod's heart. This man still had the ability to unnerve him. Pilate and Caiaphas agree with me that it is time for us to part, you and I, said Herod. You are the violator of the law and the Torah, seeking to shame the leaders of Hashem's kingdom and the temple, trying to force us to return to matters long dead. Things have changed. Hashem has changed. You have committed blasphemy against Hashem, lied about his anointed ones, and nearly caused the Romans to take away our place in nation, because you have oftentimes incited the people, as do your followers now. Herod called his niece Salome, his wife Herodias' daughter, by his brother over to him. She stood by Herod and looked at Yokanan with no pity. What should we do with him? Herod asked her. He insults God's anointed ones, she responded. Is that not blasphemy, questioning the leaders Hashem has placed over the people? Is that not questioning Hashem? She ran over to her mother. What should I say? Herodias did not hesitate. Ask for his head. Salome turned back to Herod. Take off his head. Herod nodded, half shrugged. He then took a drink from his wine cup and wiped his lips. He still half feared Yokanan, even though he stood before him in chains. How could the people react once Herod killed him? So what? The punishment for blasphemy is stoning, my dear, explained Herod. Yet he has committed other crimes. I think we should have his head. So does Mother, responded Salome. As you wish, my dear. I would give you anything, he said to Salome, and looked at Herodias, who was nodding in agreement. Blasphemy, lying, deceit are all punishable by us, said Herod to Yokanan. The Romans permit us to execute our laws on all accounts except where theirs takes precedence. And in this case, we can pronounce judgment upon you. So tell me, are you the Mashiach ben David? Yokanan would not answer him. The Sanhedrin and Caiaphas have agreed that I have the power to order your death by beheading, Herod said angrily. Still Yokanan was silent. Take him away, commanded Herod. Bring only his head back to me. Herodias and Salome wickedly giggled. Salome taunted Yokanan by dancing in front of him. Yokanan would not look at her. His only thoughts were the words of Torah he repeated in his mind. Yokanan's body was found outside Herod's fortress at Machaeros. Eleazar told Moses in the main room of Yosef's home in Bethany. Herod beheaded him and left his body unburied for the birds and the wild animals. The head was missing and could not be found, Eleazar said. It was not enough for Herod to kill him. He had to defile him, Yosef thought, as he arose from his seat where he had been reading from one of his many mystical texts. It did not surprise him that Herod would do all in his power to humiliate Yokanan and refuse him a proper burial. It was fortunate enough that the family would have the body without the head. Is my Aunt Elizabeth aware of this? asked Yosef. Not to my knowledge, responded Eleazar. How about his wife and son? The same, said Eleazar. They want nothing to do with any of us, it seems. That task shall be mine, Yosef said solemnly. Yosef had long feared Yokanan's death at the hands of the Ketim or Herod as the only eventuality. Despite their desires, the resistance in Galilee did not have the ability to mount any kind of rescue against the fortresses of Herod. The lines of communication and the distances prohibited any concerted and coordinated effort. Yosef felt a twinge of isolation, even here in his home in Bethany. Have word sent to Jude and Jacob, Yosef told him. The timing seems strange. Why incite the people prior to the Passover? You would think that they would not want to cause any anger as the masses of the people descend on Jerusalem. It's like they are taunting us. Do they know something? How could they? Answered Eleazar. There are several indications that there is an informer amongst us or Jude's closest associates, Yosef pointed out. We had the attack on Tarikiah, the capture of Nehemiah and Jonathan, and now this to provoke us. There just seems to be too many coincidences. Yosef stopped again to think. Should I go ahead and send word? Asked Eleazar. By all means, yes, Yosef said, as he nodded and rubbed his chin with his right hand, still pondering his own question. He was actually surprised that Yokanan had stayed alive as long as he had. Also, continued Yosef, instead of going with us to Jerusalem, I need you to go to Galilee and prepare for assisting us there. It is best to have my most trustworthy commander watch the north. While your skills will be missed in Jerusalem, we need to avoid the problems Jude had with the Roman legions to the north many years ago. Yes, Yosef, responded Eleazar, I understand. As Eleazar left to instruct the messengers and send them to Damascus, and then proceed to Galilee, Yosef considered his own fate and that of his family. Should he send Miriam and the boys away immediately? While he had finally been successful in getting Jude to see that his methods were not gaining them any ground, he was also unsure that his own plan of trying to concentrate on the seats of power would win in the end. He was still waiting for the inspiration, the answer from Hashem that would ensure the gathering of all Israel and the expulsion of the Romans. Despite the seeming clarity of his visions, the actual event escaped him. The windows of heaven had not opened to that point. He did not doubt, he just did not know the end. So it is for man. And as far as Miriam, she would do whatever Yosef requested of her. Yet maybe this was not the proper time. He walked outside and looked at the clear blue sky contrasted against the mild greens and the light browns of the land around him. Several children were playing on the hill just to the south of his home, their mothers standing not far away discussing the common topics for the preparation of Passover. He could faintly hear them talking of cleaning their homes and removing all leaven from inside their houses, even selling that which they had. These were his people, and most of them were trying to do the right things. All they needed was the proper leadership, not those seeking their own glory, but those willing to bring all to a higher level of understanding and awareness. That was, in fact, the true meaning of the deliverance from Egypt that was accomplished by Hashem through Moses nearly 1,500 years before. It meant the dividing of the light from the dark and the separation of the upper waters from the lower waters. It was a deeper mystery, but one Moses could not openly discuss, except with selected individuals. It would be considered heresy by those unfamiliar with Israel's true history or those uninitiated in the deeper levels of meaning in Torah. The end truth, however, was that Hashem would thrash the nations for the burdens and injustices they inflicted on the people. The rulers were the ones truly responsible for the evils in the world. While one man may injure a few, a nation could wreak horrible destruction upon thousands, even innumerable people. Where much is given, much is expected. The rulers had not taken their stewardship seriously for any but themselves. Instead of using their power to raise men to new levels of intelligence and awareness, they used it to increase their own treasuries or just to have control over the minds of the people. Moses wanted to change all that. Israel was supposed to be the nation that would be the great example, but even they had squandered it, and now the Kettim were securely controlling most of the known world, poisoning the minds of men. It must be time for change, a return, a restoration. It must be the time for a resurrection of ancient understandings. Certainly, Moses thought, Hashem would wait no longer. The crowds were beginning to gather in and around Jerusalem as the Passover approached. The masses of pilgrims flooded the city and the countryside, and the amount of housing space for the sojourners diminished. If the travelers had no one to stay within or around the city, they camped in the hills and valleys. This was typical for the celebration. There were so many people that no one could possibly have discerned the movements of the resistance forces as they mingled in the crowds inside the city and in the hills to the east. On the day of the assault, the zealots in the city would receive their arms from their comrades by having the weapons hoisted on ropes over the south wall. This they would do as the celebration came to a close and the guards were less alert. With the plans set and the gathering of forces proceeding as scheduled, Moses and Miriam, Kepha, and Jacob, along with other close relatives and friends, planned on celebrating the community Passover at the Jerusalem home of Nikdim and Ben-Gurion so that they could properly observe the Passover but still be in a better position to conduct the operations. While Ben-Gurion was a secret member of the community and understood the earlier celebration observed by the mystics, he did not have any certain information regarding the times and dates of any resistance military activities. This was a safeguard as he was a member of the Jerusalem Sanhedrin, overseen by the high priest Caiaphas, and he did not need to know details in case he came under suspicion. While Moses and his followers were at the home of Ben-Gurion, Jude was hastily concluding his part of the plan and positioning his people. His son Jacob and another young man assisted him in many of the details and served as his messengers to the dispersed zealots. Any changes in orders as well as important updates were sent through Jude's son. They also took time to occasionally discuss Torah with various men as they walked around Jerusalem, thus veiling their activities. Jude and his family would celebrate Passover at the home of a relative to his wife so that no one would see him and Moses together, a disastrous possibility that could undermine the entire plan. It would not be until after the community Passover meal that the two leaders and their closest followers would meet in the Garden of Gethsemane. But Jude did have one more important task to complete, and he called for Reu. Reu met him by the water pool on the north side of the temple. Although the Antonia fortress overlooked the pool, it was of little concern to the Romans because they could plainly observe the area and the people used it solely for healing and cleansing. As such, the meeting would draw little attention, and Jude could conceal himself in the crowds. Should escape become an issue, there was a city gate adjacent to the pool that led directly to the eastern hills. Yeshua, my master and king, Reu said in a low tone, almost a whisper, what are your commands? Jude sat with him at the edge of the pool, two of Jude's bodyguards sitting on either side of them to ensure that it remained a private conversation. This is the most important mission you have yet received, Jude began. As a member of the Herodian household, I want you to go to your master and tell him that you know who the man is who claims to be the son of David and that he is amassing a following in Samaria. If I say this, they will immediately think of you, Reu responded in as concerned a voice as he could put on. He was now concerned that his own true purposes would not be discovered. and he needed to ensure that this was not some secret test of his loyalty. Could the resistance have discovered that the Romans were onto them and that he was actually an informant? These thoughts flooded his mind as he hurriedly added, "Whatever you command will be done, but why would they believe you to be in Samaria and not here in Jerusalem at the Passover? Tell them that I was rejected by the people and that I have gone to the Samaritans. They will think me nothing but a man of light-mindedness, seeking only vain ambitions of no consequence. A simpleton," explained Jude. "Very well, master," said Reu. "Do you still want me in Gethsemane? I can gather many who will support you." "We can certainly use all the men we can get," said Jude, "but I think not at this point. We have those whom I have chosen. It is too late for anyone who may choose me. I do not have the time to test them as to their loyalties or their degree of commitment to Hashem. So, go and do only as I have commanded. Report to me as soon as you have delivered the message and get word to me. You will then go to Gethsemane and wait there until I find you." Reu nodded and excused himself. He made his way to Amaleus immediately, as Jude had instructed, but for different reasons. Upon his report to him, Amaleus then took him to Caiaphas to report of this attempted new subterfuge. Again, they met in the Antonia fortress. "Jude has asked Reu to lead us to believe he will now be in Samaria, even during Passover," Caiaphas explained to Pilate. "Why would he think we would believe such a thing after all his efforts in and about Judea?" Pilate asked, shaking his head in doubt. "Is it possible they know Reu is really our man?" "Not likely," interjected Amaleus. "We must look at this from the rebels' point of view. His stun at the temple did not gather to him the support he obviously and desperately needed. Yet he has enough forces to conduct this operation after the Passover. His show at the temple may have been a ruse to lead us to believe he cannot command a large base of support, thereby leading us to believe, as he would like it, that he has gone to raise followers among the Samaritans and is now no immediate threat. Furthermore, he told Reu to meet him today in Gethsemane to report to him of his success in delivering his message. We could seize him then." "Crafty," said Pilate as he arose from his seat and walked over to Caiaphas. "We must accommodate their plans." "What do you mean?" asked Caiaphas. "I want you to send a number of your guards north to Samaria, and I will send a sentry with them. Let it be known that we are looking for a fugitive. It is not necessary to name him, as the rebels will take it that we have swallowed their bait," explained Pilate. "That could be dangerous, Your Excellency, as we are really not sure of the strength of the forces that plan to accomplish this mission against you, Herod, and myself," objected Caiaphas. "We may need the security. Why not get him this afternoon?" "I want this on our terms. We will strike the night before the Passover as we have agreed. With their plans set for after the Passover, they will not have consolidated their abilities so early," said Pilate, as he walked confidently across the room and looked out over Jerusalem. "Your guards and the sentry need not even go that far. As soon as we have arrested the culprits, they can return." Caiaphas nodded and smiled. "The trap is set. Very well done, Reu." "Always at your service," Reu replied. "What should I do now?" "Send word to this rebel that you have told his story to your master and that you have heard that some of our forces are soon to be dispatched to Samaria," Pilate ordered. "You will be with our troops for the arrest, and point out this traitor to the unit commander," Pilate continued. "After dark on the night before Passover, I will send a cohort reinforced with a number of Caiaphas's guards to seize this pretender, this maleficent leader of the Sicarii, and kill whomever stands in our way. This dreamer will be caught off guard. We will then crucify him. Commander, prepare your men," he said to the Roman cohort commander who stood in the corner of the room. "Tonight we will have their blood and spread it upon the gates of the city. Some Passover this will be." "As you command," said the officer. "Hail Caesar." "Hail Caesar," responded Pilate. "We will now depart and do as you have commanded," said Amaleus, as he and Reu bowed and left the room. "This is the end of this Mashiach," Pilate vowed to Caiaphas. "So be it," Caiaphas agreed. As Reu and Amaleus reached the street, Reu immediately went to find Jude in Gethsemane. There were so many people already gathering on the hills that Reu knew he could not possibly find Jude. He waited by the golden gate of the city just down from the garden. It was not long before Jude's representatives came to him. "Follow us," Reu commanded the taller one. They took him up the hill and circled several times. Finally, Jude walked toward them from the shadow of a tree as the sun was starting to set. "What have you accomplished, brother?" asked Jude. "All that you commanded of me," responded Reu. "I have heard that many Romans and many of the high priest's guards are preparing to leave for Samaria in search of you." "Very good. Hashem bless you," said Jude. He then turned to his son Jacob. "Deliver the messages to all the Kittim have taken the bait, and our time has come. Tell them to prepare to execute our plans." The young men nodded and ran off to instruct Joseph and others of the success of Jude's disinformation to the Romans. "You have earned a place to stand among the sons of light," Jude said to Reu. "Very well done. We will take you to the next level of instruction as soon as we have secured the temple." "How can one so lowly as me thank you and Hashem?" asked Reu. "You already have," said Jude. "Now go and prepare for your Passover. After your duties to Hashem, return here and join us." "Yes, thank you," said Reu. "Follow me," said Jude. "I too must go and observe the Passover." Reu followed Jude and his guards down the hill. They parted just outside the Golden Gate. As Jude walked off to attend his Passover meal, Reu rushed back to Amaleus. Tonight he would lead the Romans to Jude, and tomorrow he would be a rich man. Night had now fallen in Jerusalem, and Joseph and Jude completed their respective Passover meals. As agreed, they met in Gethsemane to discuss Torah and to finalize any last parts of their plan. Gethsemane still had many quiet garden areas, even with the many people who had come for the celebration. It was a place the brothers thought the Romans and the Herodians would not consider as a staging area, since any real military operation would be difficult to mount, especially with the many people now camping there. Joseph and Jude discussed their plans with Jacob and several members of the community council. The only point of contention, the one that mattered most, remained the issue of the crimson thread. "A divided house cannot stand," Joseph explained to the gathering. "I cannot forsake my birthright," and even Yokanan agreed. "There is, however, no point of contention between us," he said, motioning to Jude. "Our demonstrations will prove our respective rights and obligations. Only when that is done can there no longer be any doubt as to whether we are as we say we are." "I see no point of issue at the moment, brother, since you do not question my position as the Mashiach ben David," Jude again emphasized, in hushed tones to avoid any possibility of someone outside their small gathering from hearing. "As you said, our demonstration is at hand." At that moment, Reu arrived and sat down just outside the main group. He had been allowed to pass the guards under Jude's instructions. As Reu watched and listened, he saw Joseph and compared him to Jude. Even in the dim light, what a resemblance! Brothers? What did this mean? His thoughts raced, even as he carefully remembered the route they had taken to arrive here so he could bring the Romans later. "Let this agony be gone from us," Joseph asked the group. "Give us strength so that we can do Hashem's will without impediment. We need to concentrate on our plans. At present, these override all other issues." "It is set. On Monday the temple will be ours, and the leaders of the Kittim will be in our hands. Praise Hashem," said Jude to Joseph and those with him. "All Israel can rest." With the tension released for the moment, the men began to think of other things. "That is well," said Joseph. "We have yet a little to do for our joy this day to be complete. Would you like to join us?" he asked Jude. Jude looked and could see that Jacob and Kepha were obviously ready to involve themselves in some additional spiritual ceremonies as they had their tallits and kippahs ready. Most obviously, Jacob and Joseph's son Joseph were in white linen robes preparatory to some additional special ordinances. Jude merely made note of it. As long as Joseph supported the resistance in ending Kittim control of the temple, he did not now care what other things he did. However, it was now Jacob with whom he found some disappointment. "Do as you must," Jude said in as civil a tone as he could. "This is indeed a joyous Passover. The liberation of our people in Hashem's temple is at hand." Joseph and those with him continued on their way up the hill to a quiet spot where few people had yet gathered. Jude watched them as they sat down and began their discussion. He then went on to attend to his own concerns. He wanted to ensure that the forces he had were properly dispersed in what would appear to searching eyes to be unorganized groups on the hills and throughout the area. He made sure that they intermingled with the pilgrims who were already there for the Orthodox Passover celebration that was to begin the next evening. He designated as a control post the area of a depression between two hilltops, Mount Scopus on the north and the Mount of Olives on the south. He also planned observation posts on the Mount of Olives and the southeast side of the city and Mount Scopus on the northeast. Finally, He checked the system of flags that he would use for communication along with his runners to ensure timely and accurate information and dissemination of commands. He planned to wait until after Passover to make all the posts operational so as to avoid any premature suspicions. After his check, he would settle for the night and inspect everything again tomorrow. He did not notice that Reu had disappeared. Up in the quiet grove where Joseph and those with him had gone, Jacob, still in his white linen robe, asked Joseph more questions about his own spiritual journey. "And what of the secret and sacred ordinances of On?" he asked. "Can we discuss those here?" Kepha and Joseph's son Joseph nodded in agreement. Young Joseph was also still in his white linen clothing, while Kepha was his usual disheveled self. But their appearances were not altogether inappropriate, for only Jacob and Joseph would receive any further initiations this night, while Kepha would act as watch. "There is meaning to your lives that is greater than expelling the Ketim," Joseph began. "We must imitate the attributes of Hashem if we are to grow and reflect him, reflecting nothing but Hashem. The first of these is forbearance in the face of evil and patience in enduring evil, so that we do not return evil when it is done to us. We must constantly seek for the right in all we do, the right use of all things for the glory of Hashem." The men sat in silence listening to this great mystic. "Forgive others, that the evil that has been suffered is erased. Be aware of your neighbor and refuse anger, seeking the higher good. Become mercy and recall only the good qualities of those that torment you, and eliminate all traces of vengefulness. Give no thought to your suffering which others inflict on you, and remember only the good. Show compassion for those who are suffering, even if those who do not do the will of Hashem. Cling to the truth and be not afraid to show mercy beyond the Torah. And assisting the wicked to improve without judging them will lift you and them and all of creation. Treat all men as children of Hashem, even those not of the house of Israel. Pray for all these attributes to come to you and demonstrate them in your lives. Once you have bound these to yourselves, you may take not only yourself to Hashem, but all the worlds as well." "Then we are to submit ourselves to the evil of the Ketim?" asked Kepha. "It is that which is in your heart to which this applies," responded Joseph. "Hashem expects us to stand for the truth and defend it, but have no evil in your hearts against those you seek to repel, for they must eventually learn these lessons as well. And who better to learn them from than those they thought to vanquish? But even more importantly, look into the evil in your own heart. That part which is the darkest in you is like the smoke behind which Hashem conceals himself. Bring the darkness out into the light and examine it, understand it. Do not run to hide it, then purge it, and the glory of Hashem will be revealed in you, and you will be his reflection." "Can a man fight with strength and without passion against his enemy?" asked Kepha, who seemed to be having the most trouble understanding what Joseph was saying. "Remember to return to others the evil that is in their hearts is to destroy yourself, and to slow down the rising of all creation," Joseph explained. "Defend your family, your friends, and your land, but do so with no hatred towards those who suffer from the work of your hands. Afterwards, show them an increase of love, and show them all good things by your own example." "Can one man's acts truly receive the notice of Hashem for the good of all peoples and nations?" asked Jacob. "Can the prayer asking Hashem to bless the 70 nations and the pleading for the atonement at Yom Kippur truly bring all creation to a higher level?" "If no other than one being at a time," responded Joseph. "For them to imitate Hashem's attributes and eventually attain to that level, they must see the example in you. We must be the hand of Hashem, just as the Torah commands. Be as wise as serpents, but as harmless as doves. And remember, no greater love has any man than to lay down his life for others. But this will not find the evil ones without guilt in Hashem's eyes." Jacob pondered what he had heard and then asked another question. "Are any others outside of Israel in possession of the secrets?" he asked. "Shem had many sons," responded Joseph. "Abraham was but one of his posterity. Yet, and our father Abraham was the example to all of us. Who knows what others Hashem has chosen? But what Abraham received he imparted to others whom he found worthy. Moses brought the sacred words from Egypt, where they had been safeguarded for centuries, and revealed them to those directed to him by Hashem. The righteousness of a man, true right use of all things, will bring to him piety and wisdom until he emulates Hashem to such a degree that the man becomes like Hashem. Then Hashem cannot hide himself from him, as they are near to one another. What, then, will he become? Asked Jacob. A Ben Adam and Ben Abbas, answered Yosef, an adopted son of Hashem, a son of the Father. At that Yosef stood up. To approach Hashem, one must practice the right use of all things and then meditate upon the letters and words of Torah until you reach the divine names. From there, all things will be shown to you. Arise, my brother, he said to Jacob. Jacob stood and faced Yosef. To you falls the succession of the Mashiach ben Joseph should I go away. You in turn shall again replace the mantle onto my son Joseph when he reaches this time of age. Then I am to lead Damascus as the teacher and high priest and the nation of Israel? Asked Jacob. You are my successor until my son attains to his time, Yosef said again. What about Yokanan's heir? Asked Jacob. That seems to have taken care of itself, answered Yosef. Are you going away, Yosef? Asked Jacob. Kepha became alarmed as well, and young Joseph could only recite his father's words to himself, trying to understand. This is all to ensure the continuity of our order, said Yosef, and in all things, counsel with Miriam. Jacob understood his instructions. Now, watch for me as I go into meditation, that I may not receive the kiss of Hashem and depart from you, Yosef instructed. The men gathered closer together, donning their tallits, tefillin, and phylacteries in preparation for meditation. Jacob took the position closest to Joseph to watch so that he could go and return. With a few initial recitations of the sacred names, Yosef was off in a vision as the men watched over him. The meditation went on for so long that the food they had eaten earlier in the evening, combined with the lateness of the hour, began to bring upon them the need for sleep. Jacob saw that Kepha and Joseph had slipped into unconsciousness, but did not believe he would allow himself to do the same. Yosef continued his meditation and then came back on his own. When he removed the tallit from his head, he saw that all three men whom he had asked to watch for him had fallen asleep. Jacob, Kepha, Joseph, he quietly roused them. Wake up so that I may continue. The men startled awake to find Yosef smiling. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak, he said, chuckling slightly. Remain with me just an hour, and it will be done, he asked them. The men agreed, and Yosef returned to his meditation. As he recited the words, however, the rhythm caused first Kepha, then Joseph, and finally a weary Jacob to again fall asleep. Yosef was on his own. The Merkava had taken him to the seventh gate, and there he stood with Anpiel, who motioned him to enter. After passing through the clear marble gate and the columns of the inner courts, Yosef found himself once again standing before the throne of glory. There, before him, sat Achtiriel, the reflection of Hashem. But he heard no words from the throne, only the continual rushing of wind that normally precedes the entry into the vision. The lack of any instruction and the absence of any assurances left him to his own thoughts. The situation rose almost to a level of confusion in his soul. What was happening? What steps should he now expect to take? Suddenly he was hurled back into the garden. He slowly opened his eyes, not sure of how the vision had so abruptly ended. He could see that his companions were asleep, but that, in and of itself, should not have caused Hashem to send him away. He could see no reason for the interruption. Then he heard something. What was that noise? There was a disturbance at the entrance to the garden. You are under arrest, the voice of a Roman, no doubt. A Roman cohort with a few soldiers from Caiaphas's guards had entered the garden and confronted several of the zealots. The zealots had tried to cover up who they were, many just continuing to mingle with the crowds. But the soldiers had reached the location of Jude, and it was obvious he had been caught by surprise. Yosef arose and awoke the other three men, and they hurried to the point of the tumult. As they ran to the lower part of the garden, they could hear the sounds of battle. Men were yelling, and the sharp ringing of metal striking against metal pierced the cool night air. Through the trees, Yosef could now see a desperate struggle. Jude and his men were heavily engaged in combat with Roman soldiers. Several of Jude's men lay wounded or worse on the ground. Jude himself had just run a Roman through with a sickle and taken the man's sword. Yosef saw Jude run another Roman through with the sword he had just taken from his dead companion, the man's face wrenching in the agony of the pain. Jude spared no skill in dispatching his adversaries. As the battle grew and intensified, with more and more men from both sides joining the mayhem, Yosef stood motionless for but a second to determine where he should place himself in the fight. His pause was just in time to see Reu pointing out Jude to some other Romans that were then just deploying their soldiers into the combat. This larger, more concentrated Roman force immediately seized Jude and slew his guards when they tried to protect him. Realizing the danger, more zealots began to engage the Romans until the entire Garden of Gethsemane was engulfed in riotous killing. All military order seemed to vanish from both sides in the darkness, as opposing groups of men faced each other randomly about the garden as opportunity or fate presented to them, and they fell upon each other in murderous rage. Most of the Jews in the garden had fled, as they wanted no part in the cause of either side and were only there for the Passover, but others more inclined to join the zealots in their desperate struggle. It was all out of control. Joseph watched as Reu fled the most severe fighting, running almost directly in front of him. The two men looked at each other but for a second, and then Reu continued his flight from the bloodshed. Joseph turned to try and ascertain the extent of the battle, and could see only more fighting erupting all around him in a chaotic manner that convinced him there was no chance of rallying a command. While Kepha had already joined in the melee, killing several of Caiaphas's guards and wounding a Roman, Joseph realized it was now a rout, and there seemed a little chance to bring together meaningful forces to repel the attack, as the Romans had concentrated their forces immediately in Jude's and Joseph's vicinity. As he looked toward the city, it was obvious that the line of torches from Jerusalem to Gethsemane were more Roman reinforcements. Just then Joseph saw his son Joseph seized by a Herodian guard. Joseph struck the guard with his sickle, blood immediately flowing from the guard's right arm. As Joseph tried to pull away from the soldier's grip, his linen robe caught in the man's belt and tore. In the struggle to free himself, Joseph's robe completely came off his body, and Joseph ran away, almost naked, but for his loincloth. Joseph also saw his own chance to escape, but was too concerned for all the others. He made his way to where the fighting sounded the worst as other zealots began to flee. He could see torches almost completely surrounding his position, and any other avenues of escape were quickly disappearing. He turned around and headed straight for Kepha's location, where he could see him struggling to fight off several Romans who had wrestled him to the ground. The Romans overcame Kepha, but did not kill him. They dragged him roughly over to where Jude was held and threw him to the ground. There, beside Kepha and Jude, were two severely wounded zealots. Joseph could see that they had been surprised and the fight was lost. He could possibly still escape, but that would seal the fate of his brothers and possibly the end of the resistance. He hesitated but a moment, realizing that he was the only chance for the salvation of their lives. He laid down his sickle, raised his arms and hands, and stepped forward toward the Roman commander and the high priest's guards. And that's the end of chapter 12. We'll start next time with chapter 13. Out for now.